I find Republicans are a lot better at controlling their party. So in the event of, the Manchinima problem that seems to be a constant theme in the United States right now, I don't understand why you'll see people like the President Joe Biden go in front of a camera and afterwards be like, oh, but I'm very fond of Kirsten Sinema and all the work she's done. Like, you would see Republicans hounding anyone who stepped out of line of the party, especially if they were the two holdout votes that they were looking for on a regular basis. And, I don't want to bring up like, they're better with the whip or anything like that. But at the end of the day, it's pretty telling that you don't have a majority of Democrats coming out in front of a camera and being like, this person is an obstructionist. They're holding back, very important legislation time and time again, whether it was that $15 minimum wage federal increase that was attached to the original Build Back Better bill, all the way up to like holding back the Build Back Better bill and gutting it repeatedly because of Manchin's deep ties to the oil industry, the coal industry. I don't want to mix this up. Yeah, it's utterly absurd. I mean, I'll give credit to people like Sanders, who at least would go in front of a camera when he had the opportunity and say, well, by the way, these are basically right-wing Republican Democrats that are holding us back, kind of thing. But it's an abysmal affair.
We think that they're just sort of the assigned baddies. Like, that's who it is now. If they weren't there, I assure you there would be two other people that would be in that position. Because the reality is that the Democrats over the past, 4, 5 presidential administrations haven't really been doing anything about this. And I'm talking about the past 3 Democratic presidential administrations where they've had majorities. And
Obama had a supermajority. So
exactly.
What's the excuse there? He had that as a campaign promise, if I remember, saying that he was going to codify Roe v. Wade into law. And then all of a sudden, once he assumed power, it's like, well, that's not really a priority for the Democrats right now.
Right out of the box.
It kind of should be.
A majority, and he couldn't even get us a public option. So it's like, I think about that, and I think about presidents like Johnson, like LBJ. Can you imagine there being like a holdout on something he wanted to put through? And he's like, oh no, those guys, we're so tough, but we can't control a senator. They don't want to.
It is the rotating villain, as Chris would say, and that is a big problem that we face. But the thing that also doesn't get talked about, which I think should be talked about, is the fact that you do have 2 senators in the GOP who every once in a while seem to be agreeable on policy that just makes total sense. And that, of course, is Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. And so 2 of them in particular saying, I did not, under these pretenses, agree that we were going to overturn Roe v. Wade, because that's what the 3 conservative justices said in their confirmation hearings, that we were not going to overturn it. Well, if that's true, then why isn't President Biden, Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi raining holy hell and saying, Senator Collins, Senator Murkowski, get on board with us right now. Let's codify Roe v. Wade. If you really care about this issue, why not even attempt to do it and get McConnell to come out and say, oh, we're not doing any of that. At least get him to do that. But in this instance, he's not even doing that. I mean, what the hell? I mean, how much more do people have to watch this to say, are they playing a game? Are they playing tricks on us?
Well, I am curious about a young Canadian's perspective on this nonsense.
I'm not actually that young. I'm in my late 30s, but I have been around for a bit of time. I'll say this. I think Susan Collins is kind of busy right now of the terrorist attack that she recently had in front of her sidewalk with that chalk. Absolutely deplorable. I'm glad that she was capable of calling the police to remain safe in her home. But no, it's like from an outsider's perspective. Well, I'll tell you this. In Canada, you're going to have a lot of liberal check marks on Twitter, and this was just disgusting to see, who are all going off about how amazing it is that we don't have to deal with this problem in Canada. Canada's this lovely utopia, and we'll never have to worry about that. Abortion in this country is just decriminalized, which means that obviously it's not a criminal activity if a doctor wants to provide it for a woman or a trans man or whoever else is seeking it. So that, like, at the same time, we have a massive problem with forced sterilization of Indigenous women. There was a lawsuit as recently as 2008 where about, I think, close to 50 to 100 women are suing the federal government for having experienced, forced sterilization. So it's been a massive problem for years in terms of not having reproductive rights for Indigenous people in Canada, for Black people in Canada, people in marginalized communities. Well, at the same time, they like the posture right now that, oh, we're so much better than the Americans because we do have complete access to abortion in this country. I mean, all that being said, my heart goes out to Americans, because it's such a rock and a hard place. It seems to be this position where it's like, well, you should do the responsible thing, and then you should mitigate the harm by voting for the party that's not actively trying to legislate against women's bodies, absolutely, or actively trying to legislate against the trans community, or trying to look at the genitals of trans kids, or any of that really fucked up shit that Republicans are doing on a regular basis. That is fucked up. That needs to be like, sure, push it off. At the same time, the Democrats are woefully inept at actually putting forth the legislation or fighting for it, in the public eye, on camera, when you have the press, when you have the opportunity to get something done. At which point, like, I understand why there's a huge young voter demographic in the US that is so jaded with the political process, because what does it look like to them, right?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because we talk about it in terms of their failure to codify Roe over the years. But there's another really big factor here, and I harp on it a lot, is the amount of Democrats that approved all of Trump's judicial appointments. And they've been doing this for years. You don't get to sit there and sign off on, very conservative, radical jurists and then act so surprised that this is happening. And the other factor is you have congressional leadership campaigning for anti-choice candidates like Henry Cuellar against that. Right. These are they call themselves pro-life. I call them anti-choice. We could call them forced birthers. I don't care. But it shouldn't be somebody that the leader of the Democratic Party, who's claiming to care about this issue, is down campaigning for an anti-choice Democrat.
Do you know what Cisneros' chances are right now, outside of getting Pelosi's endorsement from Cuellar?
It's a coin flip because he's still under FBI investigation, and she's going to have she's got a lot of money. Yeah, that was funny, right? Right. She's got a lot of money, but this race is a very unique race because it really comes down to immigration. That's the issue, and I can tell that because of where the vote splits were during the initial primary. She cleaned up in San Antonio, but he cleaned up on all the border counties. So it's a very distinct race, and depending on how hard she's going to lean into that issue in a red wave year is probably going to determine whether or not she's able to get over the finish line. I think she's got a puncher's chance of doing it. I think also the fact that a lot of people I think they're doing a pretty good job of drawing attention to the race because of how hypocritical the party apparatus really is. But at the end of the day, it's got nothing to do with being pro-choice or being anti-choice. It has everything to do with whether or not you are bought and paid for by corporate special interests. Henry Cuellar is, Jessica Cisneros isn't, and that is where it ends. And the more we talk about that is the singular issue of our time in politics, is the sooner we'll get to the realization amongst even, normie voters that, maybe we shouldn't be supporting candidates that are funded by Raytheon and, Big Pharma and big oil and all those companies, because ultimately they are the ones who are determining how our legislative branch operates on Capitol Hill. And until we get to that point, we're just going to continue spinning our wheels.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.